Hello, everybody. I want to say thank you for tuning in to the Henderson Real News. Organize, don't criticize. I'm here today to tell you again that you are important, viewers and listeners all over the world. We are very concerned about you and your future, and that's what I will talk about today and in the near years. I say years. I intend to tell you what you need to do to survive and become a real citizen in this nation, a real citizen in the world. Everything I tell you today and in the future will be put in reference to the fact that we are talking about black dominating areas where they are in the majority, starting on the precinct level in certain areas of activity. I tell you now, folks, if you don't understand that you must pool your resources, that you must pull yourselves together as a group, one nation, worldwide, regardless of the fact that there are others around you which you must work with and cooperate with, but at the same time, you have to use the strategy that has always built big nations worldwide. And since I don't want to go to ancient times, I'm just going to give you an example of how the Europeans started their ascendancy throughout the world in the early 1500s. They decided among themselves, even though they were tribes, different groups fighting against each other, they had one thing in common, one thing. They were considered white folks, or they were considered Europeans. Most of them looked alike. There was a few varieties in the color scheme, but they all considered themselves Europeans. In our situation here in America, in the world, black people are confused. They don't know who they are. They want to be Europeans. They want to be Africans. They want to be Asians. They want to be Canadians. They want to be everything except what they are, and that's what many people want you to feel, ladies and gentlemen, that you are nothing, a mixture, a hybrid of a person that's been blended and breeded into something that you are not. And I'm going to give you some examples this evening to show you one more time, and you're going to hear it many times, that in order to start a nation, whether you have what we call a military advantage or not, you have to have certain characteristics in your nation, or your people must have them. And this is what the Europeans start doing collectively in 1500 and beyond, up to today. They say if we want to be dominant throughout the world, and we will be, because no matter how many problems we have, how many wars we fight against each other, before the war, we're going to be working as a unit. After the war, we might fight for a little while, but we're going to end up focused on certain things. And the European focus has always been on the following, ladies and gentlemen, that we want to develop a system that's going to put us in a position where we can dominate the world, whether the other people like it or not. And they say there are only 5 things we need to do. We must first provide the leadership throughout the world. Move around and let people know that we're in charge, that we have the best way, we have the knowledge and the skills, and we can tell you how to change and follow our way. And they use a lot of different tactics, which I'm not going to go into today, but the first one was religion. Don't want to talk about that today because a lot of you all have been brainwashed in your religious methods, and you just feel so sensitive when somebody talk about it, you get upset. I will upset you later, not today. But when you look at the leadership potential, the leadership potential is comprehensive. The Europeans knew that in order to be leaders, you have to be leaders in all aspects of society. And the first one is education. So we're going to have one education system in Europe where we're going to teach certain things, even though there will be a little deviation here and there, but we're going to teach standard languages in our individual domains. We're going to have standard talking points when we start talking about our enemies in Japan, in Asia, in Africa. So we're going to talk about the fact that we are going to dominate economically throughout the world, starting first in Europe, and we are going to have meetings and decide how we're going to take over the rest of the world. We're going to have one Europe, one European language, with variants from those that live in other areas like Portugal, England, France, Russia. All of them are integrated to the point through their education system where they can understand each other. The next thing they said, we're going to teach that we must have political advantage everywhere. And when you start talking about politics, ladies and gentlemen, your politics must be your major framer of the institutions that's going to give you the ability to succeed and be number one. Your politics must devise the type of government you're going to have. Your government must determine who will be your military leaders, who will be the major leaders in your court systems, who will be your major industrial giants that the politician's going to pass laws to protect. That's politics, court system, military complex, and the judge system, which include, of course, the military and the police. And the next thing that nations must do, and you're going to see what you must do it, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be dominant, if you want to continue to be subservient to others worldwide, you just continue the way you're doing. And I will show you that you are not going to get very far. You have to learn how to practice what we call social intersecting relationships with your friends, with your enemies, with new people and groups that you meet. I didn't say you had to love them. I'd say you have to work with them. You have to have what we call social intercourse. Give them an opportunity to talk to you and understand what you're about. But let them know that you're going to be the leader. You're going to be the one that's pursuing the education. You're going to be the one that's going to provide the economic development for this group. And you're going to show them through your social interacting that we can work together, but at the same time, you structure your environment where you're always dominant because you control two things that those intersecting groups don't control: economic development, the military, and the court system. You don't ever give those up. So I'm telling you, with this structure, the Europeans from the early 1500s were able to conquer the known world, including outer space. In the 1960s, they took over space, the same group that I'm talking about. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to keep in mind, black folks worldwide, that if this can happen starting in the 1500s in Europe, where they transferred these systems worldwide, and in about 300 years, 15, 16, 1700, they control the world. Why you think you can't do it? Because at that time, the Europeans were about 18 or 20% of the world's population. They've always had more folks in Asia, Africa, China, Latin America, South America, and thousands and millions more than the Europeans. But they were a small group. They were organized. So the remedy, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you want to become strong and get respect between the nations of the world, black people worldwide, starting on the precinct level, and that's the smallest unit of government in America. Some precincts might not have but 15 to 2,000 people, some less, some more. So you have to learn, you must control every area where you're in the majority, starting on the precinct level. Then you look at the county level. You look at the city levels where you are in the majority. Look at the towns. Then you look at the states where you are in the majority or near majority. That's when you start using your social intersecting relationships with others. Anywhere you are up to 35%, you can dominate that area in those areas that I mentioned: education, leadership, economic development, and politics, if you know how to do it. And we will be talking about that during 2024. When you do that, ladies and gentlemen, you then can start controlling yourself to the point where you get respect, and you will be in a position where when someone tells you that they are not going to teach your culture, your politics, your religion, your history in the education system, all you have to do is open your mouth and say, that will not happen. That's what the Jews do. Anything they don't like in the world, they tell people, nope, we can't have it that way, because we control certain entities in your city, in your state. And if you go and hurt us in any area of activity, we're going to punish you. Punish. Vote you out of office. Frame you. Get you in a position where you resign under suspicion, whether you're guilty or innocent. And if that's not happening, you're going to be in a position where you're going to disappear. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you again that things must change if you want to become a real American, a real Pan-African, where you get respect all over the world. And if this happens, they will have more peace, more contact with others in harmony, less wars. And once you do this on the national level here in America, do the same thing in Europe, black people and people that have what I call advanced color in their genes, then you'll be able to do the same thing in Latin America. And the last place where you need to do this, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be very difficult to do, and that is in Africa. The 55 nations of Africa. You must organize and show that you can organize and control yourself first before you get to Africa. Because the Africans throughout this same period from 1500s up to today have always been regulated and controlled by Europeans. I don't care whether it's the Europeans call English, French, Germans, Portuguese, Scottish, Irish, whoever, they controlled it. They had many different languages, different religious institutions, but they all spoke from the same talking points. They say, we're going to dominate. Now, once you get these areas together, folks, keep in mind that I mentioned earlier, you have to work with Africa last, because that's where the prize is. You don't want to start messing with the prize nation or series of nations until you get the outline together, the small nations. Then, with your organizational ability, through your education and training, through your leadership initiatives, through your what I call principles of leadership and economic development, and showing that you have taken over certain areas where you are dominating, not controlling anything 100%, but you want to dominate where you make that final decision. Who's going to be hired? Who's going to be fired? Where will the money be spent? What programs will we develop? What programs are we going to put on the side in the big black notebook and look at it later? So when you get to Africa, ladies and gentlemen, you then will be at a point where there will be a lot of problems going on because the Europeans that control Africa even today are diverse. Chinese, Americans, of course. A lot of European Americans here, 99% of them. They have brothers and sisters in Germany, England, France, Portugal, Russia, all over the place. And they work as a unit. So in order to get those folks in Africa together, since you can prove and show that you've been able to contain your rights, made yourself respectable in America, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and then you can send your newly trained, selected leaders to Africa and work with those people that are like-minded and encourage them to do as the Europeans did when they moved into Africa after the 1500s. Move in with new leadership styles. Move in with new religions. Move in with new military groups. Move in with new weapons. Move in with new cultures and languages and get the people confused. And all you have to do in Africa, ladies and gentlemen, once they see that you have the potential to work with them, you'll be surprised how many that's already grieving and hoping and praying for change, that we have most of the resources in the world and we can't even feed ourselves. We can't even do anything but fight each other, even when we don't want to, because the Europeans fund us, give us the weapons, give us the policies, sign people to run as our presidents and rule, whether we like them or not. And they keep us fighting, keep us moving, relocating us, putting us in what we call refugee camps, moving from country to country. They all have one ethnicity, black Africans, many different languages. But this is the way you can change it, and it can be changed in less than one generation. And here is the way it can be done, folks, because it has been proven from the 1500s up to today that if you come in with a coordinated plan of attack, you can rule. And of course, you don't have to punish people to the point where they feel that they are an outlayer, where they are outlawed, where they are outmaneuvered all the time, where they are just not included in anything of any significance. You don't want people to feel that way, but you want to be able to promote peace and harmony. And when you start talking to the Africans, and it's going to happen, a lot of people don't believe it. They are saying, well, it can't happen. Anything that happened once can happen again. Here's what you're going to have to teach the Africans to do. And people say, why this can't happen now in Africa? It's because they are not united. Those 55 nations in Africa are not united. They don't have the following. They don't have one vote in the 55 different nations. That needs to be one country. All the African nations ought to get together and designate themselves as states with certain sovereignty and independence. They don't have to have the same form of government all the time. They can call it anything they want. But in Africa, you have to have one nation. And within that one nation, even though you're going to have different ethnic groups, they're all black, or what we call colored folks. Some of you good Southerners know what the word colored folks mean. Or you might have, in some areas, a group that might be considered Negroes. Others might be called something else. But anyway, when you get the African groups together and have them to be transformed into one nation, you better get ready for some hard times, because when that happens, you're going to see a lot of wars, because the Europeans that dominate those areas now want to keep themselves in control, and I don't blame them. Anytime you control one's life from birth to death, and have been doing it since the 1500s, you don't want to lose it. You'll fight to your death. The Africans can win if they have that one vote. Instead of 55 different nations, they will have one nation with a lot of divisions. Then you will teach them, and they can do it themselves. They can have one African military, one African national court system, one African national police system, with all the different assignments and arrangements in those systems, but all blend into one African. They can have one African monetary system. You get all the money and give it the same name. In America, we call it the dollar. The new system for Africa would be whatever they want it to be called. And when you control your money, ladies and gentlemen, you can control who you're going to give it to. Create one African bank, one world bank in Africa. They have it elsewhere. And then the thing that's going to make this thing solid, ladies and gentlemen, you have to have one African military system with nuclear ability, like all the European countries that are dominant. Not to use it, but have it to show that if I'm violated, I will use it. And we will all leave here at the same time. Now, don't nobody want that. Now, everybody want to punish others, and they leave, but those that are punishing don't want to go. So when they start waving their bombs, their rockets, and you start waving yours, it'll be just like those jokers in North Korea are doing. They say we're a little small nation, but we are not going to be intimidated. Every time the leader there feels that something is about to change in South Korea, in Europe, Asia, or Africa, they start talking about our military and nuclear system. They shoot a few rockets somewhere across a country or a nation, and it goes into the sea. Don't nobody want to fight them, but they're going to talk about them. They will be sending insurgents into those countries, but it's not going to be winning anytime soon. And that's why I'm telling you folks, if you want to be able to change, you must start on the local level. Think about it. Where you are, with your local resources. And the simplest way to do this, ladies and gentlemen, is to start with people that are in a position to learn and be able to do the things you want them to do. Who are those folks? Your children, grandchildren, the young people that's in the school system, the young people that are in the church, the young people that are associated with community organizations. You first have to determine who they're going to be. You can't depend on the school system to train them for you. You can't depend on the current elected and appointed politicians to train these people to change your life. You can't depend on the corporate leaders to change America and the world. They are benefiting, so why would they change? Anyone knows that if they control all the means of production, distribution, and exchange of all the goods and services in the world, that they wouldn't want to lose them. So that's why, folks, you have to do the following. Decide that I want to have a better life. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to recruit new people, turn them into new men and new women. I'm going to recruit them. We're then going to train them in our churches and the few schools that will allow it, in our community organizations, but mainly in our churches. That's where we're going to do the training. And as we get them developed to the point where they understand that they're going to have the idea of oneness, one nation, worldwide, you then influx a few here and there in the school systems, in the colleges and universities, because they are trained to think about oneness, with the idea that they're going to learn how to intersect and interconnect with other groups. We call it the social intersecting relationships, where you work with people and show them too that they can prosper. But I want you to understand, I will work with you, but I'm not going to be dominated anymore. I will treat you fairly, but I'm going to have to be in charge. Of course, there will be some resistance. But since you control the dominant factors, that's going to be something that you can handle without a problem. So when you do this, ladies and gentlemen, you will then start feeling that you are a real American, you are a real Caribbean, you're real Latin American. Because you must keep in mind that if you want to show people that you can be the one to determine a policy, you have to do like the Israelis are doing today. You have to form coalitions with people that have the resources you need. And you have to show them that you have the education, the training, the leadership ability, the economic and scientific ability to invent and create new things, new weapons, new medicines, new systems. And you have to work with them and have that intersecting relationship where anything you don't have, they will give it to you. And have your people that you have trained in your churches, your community organizations, in your schools, that you have put in positions of responsibility all over the world. That's what the Jews have done. Everywhere in the world, they have their people that they trained and put them in those positions of responsibility. And as they get in their early 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, those same people are in your education system, your high schools, colleges, and universities. They are in your legal systems as judges and lawyers, police officers. They are in your military system as officers, intelligence specialists, nuclear developers. They are in your international relation corps where they are serving as ambassadors. Those guys were trained on the local level, put in positions where they learn how to work in those systems. They were given mentors and coaches as they assigned them when they were young teenagers, high school seniors, college freshmen, graduate students. They were assigned to churches, schools, corporate entities, what we call profit and non-profit organizations, as interns and leaders, assistants and directors and so forth. Because they knew that in less than a generation, the people that they are working with as mentors and monitors are going to retire. They're going to die. They are going to change jobs. And your people that's already been trained, working as interns, mentees, those that have been coached, those that's been trained with that one mind, that one purpose, will be able to make policy in less than one generation, in 5 to 15 years. A lot of you don't believe me, but it can happen because it has happened, and it's going to continue to happen. So if you don't do it, if you don't love yourself enough, where you say, I want to be in control for a while because others have done it, you form those relationships. And when you get to the point where you have people that attack you, you can just do the same that others have proven. The Europeans in Asia, Africa, China, Russia, they all did the same thing. But you have to do one thing that they are doing in Europe, something you don't want to do once you get in position. You don't want to channel yourself off in different alignments where you are getting ready to fight each other when there's some controversy. And that is exactly what the people have done in Europe, in Asia, in Russia. They used to be one, but now you have dominant groups that are aligned with the Russians. You have others that are aligned with the Europeans in Europe. You have other groups that are aligned with the American European people, the descendants of Europe. You have others that are aligned with the Chinese. And then you got those Indians over there. They don't know what they are. They're everything. But they have been influenced by the European systems. And that's a country with very little democracy, but they call themselves a democracy in India. They call themselves a democracy in North Korea. And even the Chinese call themselves practitioners of democracy, that we are for the people. Call yourself what you want. But you got to show, though, that if you mess with me, you're going to see who I am. I'm going to be self-sufficient. I'm going to control my own destiny from birth to death, or we're going to fight about it. Listen to me, folks. Promote peace, but have that hand balled up out of sight so you can throw that punch when you need to do it. But throw it first with peace and with a smile. But you got to be prepared because the other people are doing the same thing. So I must tell you, folks, it's moving to the point now where we are in a position where we have learned that you can change your destiny from birth to death in certain areas of activity, and it will not take a full generation to do it. 3 to 7 or 9 years. I know you don't believe me because you all are hard-headed people. The Bible talked about you hard-headed folks. You don't believe anything. And some of your distant relatives prove to you that you are going to end up in a bad situation, because if you look at some of the stories in the Bible, they had that same thing going on. People didn't believe what they heard. They were fighting and raising hell and disturbing the peace. And then God said something to the point that things are so bad in this world, I really hate I made it. So I'm going to have to do something about it. And he called a certain prophet. And that prophet said, Lord, I tell you, I don't want to do this, but I'll do it. And old Noah started building that ark. People started looking at him and talking about he and his family. Said, that man building an ark on the sand. Said, we haven't had rain around here in 40 years, and he's telling us we need to change, we need to get ready. I'm not going to go into the history of the Bible and tell you what those folks were doing. Read that yourself. They were doing everything except looking out for their collective interests. Gambling, hoe-hopping, stealing, worshiping idol gods. I'm not going to tell you about that because some of you all are doing the same thing. You don't want to look out for your future. And one day, when the rain started, that was an opportunity to change. But they didn't go. They waited until the water started overflowing their cities, their towns, their homes. And then they started to the ark. And just before they got there, the leader had his hand ready to knock on the door. And Noah said, "It's too late, boy. I got to go. The Lord told me to close the door." You hear that rhyme? It's too late, boys. I got to go. God told me to close the door. That ended that world. And as the history shows in the Bible, read it sometime. I like to make it simple so a third grader will understand what I'm talking about at all times. You know, I've been telling you this for a while. Things finally settled down. And God said, basically, well, I'm going to give these folks another chance. But even though I don't want to do it, I'm going to give them free will where they can do right this time or not. They will have a chance to do right or wrong. But I'm going to give them another chance, folks. You have another chance. But I want you all to know, though, we won't have water next time. It's going to be fire. And I just got through talking about that fire that you're going to have to deal with in the future, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you during your lifetime, those that are 65 or younger, going to have to deal with the fire if you don't organize. You got to stop criticizing others. I call it stop criticizing the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their financial supporters. Look out for yourself. Look out for your relatives. Look out for your supporters and get some, and you all pool your resources. Train your own people, starting on the local level, wherever you're in the majority. Put coalitions together, memorandums of understanding with other groups. We call them intersecting and secting relationships. Intersectionality, that's the word a lot of people use these days, which means simply that I'm going to go outside of my comfort area and work with other groups in the area that might help me, that's suffering a little bit, that might not like me, but I'm going to show them that if they get with me, they'll have a better situation going. And one day they will be comfortable. And we can decide then whether we're going to work together or not. Because we are not going to be permanent friends, not permanent enemies, but we're going to work with you. And that's what you have to do, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why when this deal gets done in these what I call offshoot areas, the peripheral areas of Africa, and get in there and start teaching that same concept to Africa, the world will wake up. And they'll stop all that fighting. They will start trying to send ambassadors throughout the world. And that's what they're doing right now in America, in the Middle East, where we have our Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. He's headed to the Middle East, his fourth trip since the war began a few months ago. And he's running around talking to all the diplomats in 13 different nations and all kinds of folks over there in the Middle East, saying we're going to have some peace over here because we are getting ready for World War III Part 1. And I hate to tell you, but I will tell you in private, it has already started. That's what this man is saying. Read the papers. Do the research. I know you don't want to believe me, because he is probably not going to tell them, you don't have to worry about the flood. I'm not worried about it. I'm worried about these bombs, these rockets. And if we mess with the wrong people, we're going to have to worry about that nuclear bomb. That's why he's over there for the fourth time in the Middle East, talking to the folks in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Israel, with his team that's following him from the United States. They are working silently and secretly with all kinds of folks in that area, the Palestinians, people with the United Nations. They're saying we're killing too many people. Some are saying in the same diplomatic meeting, no, we're not killing enough. And this ambassador from America, Secretary of State and others are saying, no, we got to have a little moderation here. Say, now we have history to show that if you continue to kill, if you continue to deny people food, clothing, shelter, medicine, heat, and respect, that you might win this war. But you're not going to win the battle, because in a few years it's going to be intensified to the point where only 15 nations are involved now. They're going to have nations all over the world getting ready to take advantage of you. Say it won't be the flood. It's going to be fire that's going to destroy us. So now let's stop this killing. Let's start negotiating. Let's start having the enemies that we don't like to go and start talking together with us and themselves and work out a peace plan. And then we're going to see if we can have, and I know you don't want to hear this, see if we can have one world government where we will have one world military, one world court system, one world economic system, one world monetary system, one world people of the world. You don't want to hear that, folks, because you'll say that will never happen. It just might. If you start negotiating and you don't have that nuclear weapon dropped or shot from North Korea. They have some in India. They have some in Asia. They have some nuclear weapons in Israel. A lot of them in America, Russia, the Chinese got them. And according to our research, there are other nations that are so close to nuclear weapons until it's almost a shame. So when they start rattling those, sooner or later, if we don't have peace, somebody going to accidentally push the button. Now, it's not going to kill everybody, but it's going to make a lot of people suffer. And as I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, don't worry about it too much. It's going to happen, but everybody's not going to die. They had a war called the 100 Years' War. You've heard me talk about it. The 100 Years' War, many, many centuries ago, and everybody didn't die then. They fought for 100 years. They fought and talked, killed thousands and thousands, ruined families, nations, but they continued to fight. Then they decided we're going to stop. This time, it might not be any stopping if you don't start working now, black folks and others, and in areas where you're in the majority. As I conclude, I'm going to tell you, you got to do the following. Change. Recruit your own people. Select them. And then put them in positions of responsibility, in education, in leadership positions, in economic development, in your religious institutions, and of course, in your politics. That's the way the world should be heading. Otherwise, some fool is going to push that button. And I'm only concerned about those that are 65 and younger. Anyone over 65 don't have too much to worry about, because what I'm talking about not going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. It's going to be after that, and most of the old devils going to be gone. And the few that's not gone, they're not going to have the ability to even know what's going on. Now that sounds harsh, but my job is to give you the facts and the reality. So until later on, this is the end of the Eld Henderson Real News Show. And I want to tell you folks, as I always tell you, organize. Don't criticize the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their financial supporters. You have the ability to do what you want to do and make yourself an important entity in the world. You can make your own decisions from birth to death. And all you have to do is do it. And as I conclude, if you want to hear more information, all you have to do is call us at 601-201-1957, or go to your computers and your iPhones and sign in at www.webelievedigital.com. And you can find us there. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, and all kinds of different social media courses and sources. And call us and write us and say, we need you all to come and talk to us. We'll be glad to come to your churches, your schools, your community organizations, your family reunions, and show you how to get this thing done while you are alive, and you won't have to worry about the fire. Because the good book said, no more water, no more floods, the fire next time. And my job is to tell you, they're already heating up the oven. World War III, Part 1 has started. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for future episodes of the Elder Henderson Real News Show. Organize, don't criticize. Thank you until next time.